Okay, guys, it's the moment we've all been waiting for. Destiny was on Middle Ground episode, Black Conservatives versus White Liberals. You know, you guys actually encouraged me to sign up for this episode as well. I don't know why I bothered, because I feel like Destiny and I fill a similar niche, except he's better. But yeah, I'm curious about watching it, man. I'm excited. I'm excited. So let's get this party started.
The 112th episode of Middle Ground. This is the 112th episode of Middle Ground, and we want you to help us decide what the next 112 episodes will be.
That's a lot to ask for. I could maybe come up with one or two, but 112 all right now, it's too much.
Join our Middle Ground Patreon community and make Middle Ground with us.
Okay. They should do one that's like couples with political disagreements or something.
I was chosen to read the following prompt. White Americans have way more advantages than Black Americans.
Yeah, beast. Yeah, probably. You know, I don't know that we live in a society where it's an active thing anymore. I think maybe it's almost like it's so ingrained right now. I would say, generally speaking, of course, there's going to be caveats. Like, you know, if you're a well-off black person, you're obviously going to do better than like a or the average white person. In fact, you might be able to argue that a well-off black person might even do better in society than a well-off white person because of things like, you know, quotas and whatnot. But for the general population, I'd say, you know, you have a much higher chance of being born into poverty and a bunch of other, you know, systemic conditions than if you're white. You know, you're probably gonna have a higher chance of not liking the police because historically the police have oppressed you and your family, and that teaching gets passed down. There's always going to be people that have, what is it called, like subconscious bias. And since they're so the way the subconscious bias generally works is like anybody of a race perceives other people that they're not familiar with of another race as like the less trusting of that individual until they get to know them. And so if there's a lot of white people, and then that means there's a lot of white cops, and then that means there's a lot of white people in prisons or as lawyers or judges, you probably have a little bit of an easier time just being white. So there's a lot of things. I would say generally speaking, yeah, you know, sure.
I think I'm a rarity here.
It would seem so. Do white Americans have more advantages because they're white, or do just white Americans have advantages because of historic factors? I think that people want to argue at the end of the day over whether it's because you're white or not. I think that the answer is because you're white in the past, and that's how it kind of carries over to today.
Sure.
You know, even in times of the United States history where black people tried to build wealth, you know, with the Tulsa riots and everything, where, yeah, this wealth has been destroyed.
I'm going to turn myself down
something that's
just a
upsetting me is
little
when
bit.
conservatives talk about how you can't blame the past for what's happening in the present. That is true to some extent, but then the next breath they'll talk about how important it is to have dual-parent households, how important it is to have a strong family, to have responsibility passed on from parent to child. And we've seen in the past that because of racial issues, that process has been severely disrupted.
The funny thing is that agreeing with all these things is when I did my research when I was younger, which arrived me to my standpoint of being a conservative, because I believed it was racist, Democrat, liberal ideologies and policies dating all the way back to the 1800s, all the way up to the 1960s, and then the purported big switch. But I think it was more so when Democrats decided to be a bit more cloak and dagger about their true opinions of black people and be more secretive and more, oh, we want to help you by, you know, doing these things and seeing them as inferior.
I mean, yeah, maybe. I mean, my understanding is the Vietnam War only ended because we looked hypocritical. Oh, excuse me. What am I saying? My understanding is the only reason that like black people got their civil rights in 1965, or was it 4? I don't know. Was because we were in the Vietnam War and it looked hypocritical because our justifier was like, oh, we're here to spread freedom when we weren't even free at home. And so, yeah, sure. I mean, it does seem like anytime black people or any, you know, marginalized community gets something, it's at the benefit of political power. Conservatives just have no interest in like actually, you know, trying to capture the black audience or the gay or trans audience, or, you know what I mean? So like, are Democrats, do they necessarily care? Probably not. I think that there are definitely Democrats who do care generally because there are people, but does like the establishment care? No, probably not. The establishment wants to like win. So sure, you can make that argument, but either way, you're probably better off. You're probably better off, you know, being a Democrat if you're black, because regardless of the intention, you're going to get represented better either way. You know, I haven't heard a conservative solution to any issue, whether it's the issue with welfare, with health care, with anything. And you want to know what you want to know what the conservative solution is to these issues? It's UBI. Like Milton Friedman, was a pretty popular conservative. Like, he was being for a negative income tax. I mean, we're talking about, instead of having like highly conditional welfare programs, it is like, it's just, here's some money. It gets rid of all, like, a lot of the bureaucracy of different people middlemaning our welfare systems. You know, there's when it comes down to it, you know, UBI would be a huge thing. It would be like a replacement to a drastic increase in a minimum wage. It's really good for small businesses. It gets money into communities. It gives people the choice to do what they want with that money. You might be like, well, what if they spend it incorrectly? Everybody spends money like shit. The only difference between a rich person and a poor person spending their money like shit is the rich person can recover. So, you know, if conservatives really wanted to get their shit together and actually advocate for the middle class on an idea that like preserves freedom preserves freedom, they would say UBI over like socialized medicine and socialized this. And so they would just be a UBI defender. But there's nothing. There's nothing going on. So.
Affirmative action, welfare, all sorts of things that eventually ruin our culture and place us where we are now.
So
but I want to get back to the history of it, because we're talking
Well, I just want to make sure we're clear. Giving them money hurt them, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, giving them, because if your father's out of the home, that's when we give you the money.
Yeah, so the idea that he's talking about is the conditionality of the welfare. That's why I like UBI, because it would help replace the welfare program. If your conditions are like you have to come from a single-parent household, you're less likely to get married to take advantage of that. And that mental switch of getting married, it's a mental commitment because you are bound together, and it makes you more likely to stay together and respect each other. That's one big aspect, right? That's part of it. Another thing, too, is I think welfare is really good overall. But I think in poor communities, it doesn't help as much in the capacity that, like, let's say you're in like a decent middle-class community. If you lose your job and go onto some kind of welfare program, you getting off the welfare program based on the availability of jobs is probably going to pay you better in the long run. And the job you get will have a higher chance of mobility. In poor communities, I don't think that that's there. Like, your best bet is working out of a fucking McDonald's and hoping to become a manager that makes $1 more an hour. Like, if you had to make the same money on or off welfare, or even slightly less on welfare, but you don't have to work, you work 0 hours versus 40 hours, what are you going to choose? Part of it is the availability of jobs, but I think a UBI would be massive. You put a UBI, everybody's making, you know, depending on how you do it, whether it's $1,000 a month or you do a negative income tax that's like more money the less you make. That would be massive. That's massive money going into the economy. That's more jobs. That's more businesses. That's more growth. You know, I think that increases opportunity. The white guy in the hat, Alec, called one of the black conservatives that is a bootlicker for having friends who are cops. Okay, interesting.
If you're living in this housing,
so then give them the money while the dad's
rent-free.
Well, then give them the money while the dad's in the home.
If you're working this amount of hours and getting less than this amount of dollars, you're getting money from the government. Yes, it is incentivizing.
You're throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
I don't even know what that means in this scenario, because yes.
Well, what he's saying is that, like, instead of trying to improve the welfare system, you're saying we should just get rid of the welfare system. Yeah, I mean, sure, that's what he's doing. You know, I don't see, that's the problem. Is like conservatives, they don't say, hey, the welfare system is broken here. How can we fix it? They say, oh, it's broken. We should just get rid of it. Which, yeah, I mean, I agree. It's throwing the baby out with the bathwater, for sure.
Okay, you want to talk about throwing babies out with the bathwater? Margaret Sanger wanted to exterminate the black race because she thought they were weeds. So yeah, we can literally talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's what Margaret Sanger.
See, you shouldn't have said that, because now he's going to virtue signal about abortion. I'm assuming that's what he's. I don't know. Maybe he's not. I'm assuming that's what a reference to.
What Democrat policies wanted to do to my people. So that's why I feel so strongly about it, because it is these policies that date back centuries that were built off of the death and poverty of my people.
Let's take a breath.
So I'm breathing.
Okay.
Whoa! Is that a dog whistle to make fun of black people getting hurt by cops? Think about it.
So a lot of babies aren't, but I am, sadly.
I don't know what that means. When I say throw the baby out with the bathwater, you want to completely get rid of welfare, okay? Or at least the I don't want to put that on you haven't said that, but the conservative apparatus does, clearly. So giving money to a group of people does not hurt them.
I mean, sure, if you're talking about a lottery, just say, take money. But yes, there are strings attached to that money.
Take all the money.
There are strings attached to that money.
Give them millions. Make them all millionaires. I don't care. Giving money to black people does not hurt them.
And that has not happened, though. That has not happened.
What do you mean?
That has not happened.
I'm having like brain rot from this conversation. What the fuck?
It hasn't been a reparation. It hasn't been this or that. It has been a welfare program, Great Societies Act, that was built off of the idea of, hey, we get these families split up, we get these people living here.
So then let them keep the family together and keep.
I don't think that the intention has necessarily been like, the intention of welfare was never to split up families. Welfare was accessible to white people, and then black people didn't have access to it for a long time. That's my understanding. And then black people said, we want access to it. And then they got it, and then I think that because of like the impoverished conditions surrounding it, that's where the issue lies more than anything else. Like I said before, like I think that because there was so much poverty, it made it difficult to to utilize welfare correctly, I would say. But it wasn't like an intentional thing. Like even the crime bill, what was it, the 1994 crime bill? A lot of black people rather were like, oh, like, yeah, do this. We got to get drugs out of our community. Like, I don't, not every bit of, I would say I would argue that it's still a form of systemic oppression, but isn't necessarily like racially intended. That's how the system keeps pushing itself forward.
Keep all the money.
I mean, I guess so, but I guarantee you.
I guess so. Why would you not advocate for that?
So, in your, I guess, research of like history of this country and everything, do you find like the Reconstruction era and like the failures of like what it wanted to be and then what it ended up being, and then which led into had downstream effects to enter into the Jim Crow era, and you have policies like redlining that influence how schools are funded. The downstream effects of slavery, do you think put black people as generally in a worse off position than white Americans?
I think generation by generation the effects of slavery have been diluted, but generation by generation the effects of racism, welfare-based policies, and things of that nature became even more great. So in the 1880s or so, when we had our first black members of Congress, which were indeed Republicans, I think that was a great start for things. But obviously we had terrible things that happened, like the Tulsa massacre, among black people being chased out of their homes by the KKK,
Sure.
all funded by the Democrat Party, all supported by the Democrat Party.
Well, I mean,
it's so the problem is like everything sounds good until we decide that it's the Democrats' fault. Because first and foremost, like, let's just be real. Who flies the Confederate flag? Republicans. Who are the racist KKK members? People who fly the Confederate flag. There's obviously a party switch. I'm sorry, I'm not picking my nose. I have fucking nose hairs that are like so tickly. I have to like rip them out. I know this is disgusting, but like you can cope. And it's just what the problem is that like this person, they shouldn't think Democrats are like amazing and on their side, although they're probably care about have a better interest for black people than Republicans. But this constant reinforcement, it just sounds like almost like it almost sounds brainwashed in some capacity, So
I need to stop you there. Can you attribute not to the party but to the ideology? Because I think when you think, regardless of whatever the party switch was, traditionally conservative values did not that's more aligned with more racist policies in this country.
Very difficult to compare 2020's conservatism to 1880s conservatism.
Sure, but like you're trying to compare 1880s Democrats to 2020 Democrats, so it doesn't really add up that you will glaze the Republican Party and then you won't have the same. You're engaging like a level of cognitive dissonance for the Democratic Party.
Oh, I was loving the 1v4.
So personally, I feel like there's really only one thing that white people have a true advantage over black people with, and it's that white people are less likely to be forced into a box. It happens with black people onto other black people, but it especially happens with white liberals onto black conservatives, where we are told that we are supposed to think a certain way, be a certain way, and if we're not, then we're called all these names like etc. And the worst of all is bootlicker, because I hate when a white liberal tells me as a black man that I'm a bootlicker, because then I ask, whose boot am I licking? Because you're telling me as a white person that me as a black person that I'm licking your boot because I don't think in this box that you want me to frame my mentality in. That to me is real racism, and that's.
I mean, I don't disagree with the part where he says that is a form of like maybe there's not as much freedom of expression for black people because of like either black people around them or like white liberals saying like you have to think or feel this way. I agree with that, but I think that can be in conjunction with other aspects.
That's what we need to stop allowing to happen to us, because black people are so quick now to not branch out and to have new ways of thinking or to go into careers like agriculture and these other career paths that black people don't typically get into. It's not because of racism stopping them from getting in there. It's because we're told for so long that you have to follow this path and you have to think a certain way.
I think America is a great place for a black person. I think I'm an American. Anything that's available to you is available to me and mine.
I've personally never experienced white people having way more privileges than me. Like, I'm sure you could find certain institutions where black people are treated differently, but in general, I don't think that I've missed out on anything because of being black.
Yeah, like I went to a Jay-Z concert once, and I was the only one getting bullied, okay? That's one of those institutions, all right? What the hell is that? What's all that about, huh? The hell are you fucking bullying me for? I paid for my ticket, too,
And if anything, it's going to be more of a voice because people will want to hear what I say now because I'm black. So if anything,
yeah, I think socially, like on the internet, black people, I would say that like we don't police any other group except for white people, to be honest with you. Like there is an interesting thing there, but I'd still say, I mean, it's obviously you're better off. You'll have less issues to deal with in life if you're black, I would say, or if you're white, excuse me. But like on the internet, it's like a little different. We've heavily socially policed white people, and I don't think it's bad necessarily, but we should police everybody the same, right? I mean, that's where you get things like you can't be racist to white people. And again, I've never heard somebody say that wasn't trying to be like hateful or prejudiced towards white people. It seems to be like that's kind of the intention. So
I have more of a platform now just on the basis of being a black conservative and saying what's not popular than I would if I was just a white person who was also conservative.
I agree with
sure.
the Supreme Court's decision to end affirmative action.
That's an interesting one. That's an interesting question. Here's my thing. You know, affirmative action needed to exist 100% in the past, right? We lived in a time where people's biases were front and center. They were denying non-white people jobs, even if they were as qualified or more qualified. Today, I don't know if that's still necessarily happening. And so, like, do we need to have affirmative? Did they even end all of affirmative action, or was it just in the colleges? But either way, do we necessarily need to? Are we dealing with those same issues? We probably are in some areas and are not in other areas, you know? And so it's like, do we necessarily need it? Maybe. I don't know, is my answer. What I'd want to know is if there's a push to end it. This is how I would say that they should end it perfectly. Say, we want to end affirmative action because we feel like now it's unfair to white people or something. Let's say that was your argument. So what we're going to do is we're going to end it, and let's say they do that for 3 years or 5 years, and we're going to do a study, and we're going to see if there is some kind of disadvantage aspect to if it's having a negative impact. That's what I would say would be the best way to do it. So, but I don't know if it's necessarily good. I would honestly say, I don't know, I would say probably isn't necessarily good, but I would say if you're going to get rid of it, you should at least have like a parameter in place to study it to see if it was the right decision or not.
I'm not going to start. Someone else can start. Sorry. I think affirmative action has served its purpose. I think that it was necessary for a particular time, and I think that every black person knows how to get into college. I mean, you can pull out the names, the Oprah, President Obama. You can pull out the head of Time Warner was black man, the Forbes was black man. We know what to do now. We don't need affirmative action anymore. And to me, affirmative action is offensive sometimes, especially nowadays, because I have 6 children and 2 boys, 4 girls. And all of them went to Harvard and Columbia and this one and that one. And it breaks my heart to think that they accomplished that goal of getting into these institutions just because of the color of their skin.
Well, that's first of all not true. They didn't just get it because of the color of their skin. That's obviously not true. There's no way they got in and were able to stay in there if they weren't talented. So that's not true. However, I understand the general sentiment of it can feel condescending when you get a position when you were given, you know, an extra leg up. And so it might feel like, hey, how do you know if you got that position because you were qualified, or part of it's just because you were black? Like, that could feel condescending. I get that. But I'm sure, like, there's no way that they were able to maintain it if they weren't qualified. I just don't believe that. Oh my God.
Definitely say that it creates a lot of tension when you have affirmative action. I remember my first week at the University of Illinois, I was sitting with some classmates, and a white student turned to me and jokingly like, hey, Xavier, like, did you just attach a smiley face when you applied for this college? And I started asking what he meant, and he said to me that he was like, you're black, I'm assuming you had decent grades. You could have just attached a smiley face and you would have gotten into the university. So
well, that just sounds like that kid is an annoying racist piece of shit. Like, I don't even know what to say to that. Okay, cool.
I was livid by that, and I went off. I started naming all my accomplishments, and I felt so confident only for about an hour. Because then an hour later, I started saying to myself, like, wow, like, did I actually earn my way in here? I started to have this insecurity, and I started wondering.
Well, that doesn't really seem like an issue with affirmative action. It seems like an issue with a racist white person complaining. So, you know.
To myself, did I earn this position myself, or did my ancestors' suffering earn this for me?
And too, I've seen it in the sense of like affirmative action.
I mean, you can make that argument about anybody though, right? Like, if you're a white person that's born into money, like, did you really earn your life, or do you only get your life because your ancestors worked hard and were able to accumulate wealth and afford to put you through better schools and not have to struggle, be able to eat properly because that helps your development? And I think there's so many different aspects to that. So, okay.
walking away from other people who are minorities. Like I had a friend who was Asian, and he in high school.
How's my voice compared to the video, by the way? I'm just curious.
And he really wanted to go to MIT. That was his dream school. He interned there. He was super like prepared to go there, and he didn't get in. And you can only assume that it was because of affirmative action, because they have such a large Asian population that they want to admit other people.
Maybe possible.
Yeah, I was going to actually argue that it's more racist nowadays because it excludes so many Asian Americans from getting into universities who do deserve a spot, and they can't get in because of affirmative action, which again, like you were saying, was necessary at the time.
Yeah.
But now it's like anybody, if you have the skill to do it and you're in America, you can get in.
I don't think affirmative action is the worst thing, considering all the different types or aspects of a background you might take into account when somebody's getting into college.
Sure that I'm not too bad.
Clubs, you know, Boy Scouts, what type of classes they took, that might not be available.
I'm an Eagle Scout.
Available to everybody. I don't think that factoring in the affirmative action is necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like because of everything you guys have said, the optics behind it are so horrible today that even if it is slightly beneficial in the long run for certain people, I think we can probably refocus most of that into figuring out like the class that people come from, the neighborhoods, the backgrounds or whatever, without it having to necessarily target race. The only thing that I kind of
the video needs to be louder. Okay, I'm gonna turn myself down.
Wonder now that it's gone is instead of a black person being in school thinking like, man, am I here because I'm an affirmative action pick, is it going to be a kid that is poor or a kid that's from a different zip code?
I think we should do away with all of it. It's just like submit an application, no demographics. Why do they ask your sexuality? Like, why do they ask all that stuff?
Do they ask your sister? I mean, I haven't gone to college in a while. This is what I'm saying, though, is that if you are a conservative that's like, yo, we need to stop focusing on all this complicated BS, you should be an avid supporter of universal basic income, because it's just very basic and simple and gives people money, and it lets them do what they need to do with that money. It could be enough money. It sounds good. Okay. You could, am I good now? Whatever. You can afford to like not have to necessarily go to work and go to school at the same time, which gives you more time to focus on school. You have more money for better food. You have more money for so many different things. You would be a UBI supporter. That's the conservative solution to a lot of our problems moving forward. And we just don't. We just don't do it. Conservatives just don't. Well, I mean, I'm not a conservative, but conservatives just don't focus on that as a potential benefit. So it's like, what are you doing?
So, if affirmative action accomplished its purpose, why do we still see the...
Also, what I will say is that, like, the optics thing from Destiny, I think it's just like, I don't know if I necessarily agree with the argument. If he believes that it's still more benefit, because there's nothing you're ever going to do is going to be 100% beneficial to everybody. The conversation is not, hey, are black people or BIPOC individuals getting affirmative action? Is that having a negative impact on white people? The conversation is it still worth it for affirmative action? Are we helping more people overall than hurting? Because that's how we do everything. Like, there's nothing that you're ever going to, like, for instance, let's say my wife wants to go out to dinner. She's like, oh, I want to go to Chili's. I don't want to go there, but someone's benefiting and I still get to eat. That's affirmative action. From an optics perspective, I don't think that we should necessarily focus on the optics all the time. Sometimes it's important, but if it comes down to like overall helping people, I wouldn't go with like an optics argument necessarily. But I get what he's saying. I mean, he's saying let's just help poor people, which I think sounds great.
The disparities that we do in the profession.
UBI sounds like a communist to you? Bro, you literally live in a system where if banks default on all the fucking shitty investments they make, they get all their money back because we have to subsidize that. Okay, so you're trolling. I know you're trolling. The reality is we live in a socialism bullshit fucking economy anyway. Why is it that rich people get to make bad investments and then they get to recoup that if they lose? But you know, but if they do really well, they get to reap what they sow, right? So,
professional workplace. If you average white wealth and compare it to black wealth totals, white people as a whole have about 50 times greater wealth than black people as a whole. Per capita. So I just don't understand why you think affirmative action has accomplished its purpose. I don't see
that. Curious. Why do you assume that just because there is a disparity means it's because of a racial issue?
This is your answer to that question. It's because this is how you answer. Yes, you answer the question. Do you think black people and white people are equal? You say, yeah, I do. And so why do you think black people are doing worse than white people? That's the only question. And since we have a history of slavery, segregation, destruction of like the black communities, over policing, we know that that's probably the main issue. So
what else would it be from?
I mean,
upbringing, economic abilities,
desire.
Right, but where do those where do upbringings come from in these poor communities, like poor black communities that are ravaged by like drug selling and gangs? Why is that there? Because of a distrust in the current system, because of a history of oppression. There's so many different things. Nobody's gonna choose to join a gang if they have access to money. Because one of the problems too is like you have this issue where there's gangs in a particular area, and what happens? These gang members, they're not really necessarily bad people. They'll walk around and give people money sometimes, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I want to be that. They're doing good for my community. That's the whole thing.
Desire to go, desire to.
I mean, zip code does play a lot. If you grow up in a neighborhood that experiences a lot of trauma, you're not as likely to do as well in school, which means.
Why did they grow up in a neighborhood that experiences a lot of trauma?
I mean, lots of people do.
Yes, but why specifically do more black people?
Government assistance programs.
Government assistance programs, like what?
Okay, but that's still a systemic oppression to you. It doesn't really matter.
Try redlining.
I mean, you can go into that if you'd like to, but let's take a look at the Great Societies Act.
I wish somebody would answer the welfare thing for him and say, like, welfare, white people had access to it too. What black people wanted access to it. The reason why welfare may not help in poor communities is because there's just less of an incentive to get off welfare programs because there's no jobs in the area.
Act, which was created to kick black fathers out of the home and get black mothers on welfare.
That's not what it was created for. Like this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
These things aren't.
That might have happened, but that wasn't the intention of the program. He thinks that that's what the intention is. Everybody in the United States has access to welfare. What he's saying is just not correct. He's just yapping.
Beneficial for economics. These things aren't beneficial for actually paving a way for success for black children and black families. I mean, reducing a 2-family household to a 1-family household isn't going to make them the richest man in the world.
What?
It isn't even going to get them out of
2-family household to 1-family house. What the fuck is he talking about?
High school, nonetheless, the ability to even get to college.
You mean
the child? Yes, but a 2-parent household in comparison to a 1-parent household, that child is not going to be nearly as successful. That child is more disposed.
I would argue that the bigger issue with it is lack of education, because like I said, there is an incentive to not get married if you get more money when you're not married. But you also get money when you're married. You get tax benefits. I'd say it's an education thing. People are having, like, in general, in poor communities, people are less educated. When it comes to sex, they have less concern for their future because they don't really see that they're going to have a bright future because they came from an uneducated area. And that's why poor people, it doesn't matter what the race is, end up having, like, less protected sex. And they don't care about their futures. So it's not really the welfare that's a problem. Like I said, though, I do think that, like, that's why I said a UBI, it solves those problems, baby.
To being sent into prison by doing crimes or not doing very well in school. So how are they even supposed to get that, that wealth disparity shrunk if they aren't even able to get out of the community that is causing these problems for them?
Something I think that this conversation illustrates is that, like, affirmative action is literally the very end of the line of a lot of different parts of a person's life. And by that point, trying to rectify all of the inequities
Where's the blue hair, pussy?
To try to remedy any of that at the very end with affirmative action, it might just be too broad a brush, and maybe we'd be better served focusing on the earlier issues than trying to throw a kid who maybe, can barely read at a 6th grade level into a college to hope that that's the thing that fixes the problem.
I get that. That's like a Thomas Sowell thing where Thomas Sowell's very interesting. I like to read some of his stuff. I don't agree with everything, but it's an interesting perspective. He has a perspective of one of the negative aspects of affirmative action is that it might put some black college students into a situation where they may not necessarily benefit from. Like it might be too difficult. Like if they end up getting in a school that's a little too good, that might be above their ability, not because they're black, but because of whatever, systemic issues they had, that might make it so that they'd be better off getting like A's in a college that's not considered as good than D's or C's in a college that's amazing, right? That's the kind of the argument. It's interesting. It's an interesting argument. Another aspect is that, like, if you this is an interesting one too. This is Thomas Sowell, not necessarily me. I think it's interesting though, is that if you hire a black person and you fire them, they have the ability to attribute it to race and have more of a justifier for suing, and so it might discourage business owners from wanting to hire black people as much. So again, interesting. I'm not sure I agree with all of it, but it's an interesting perspective that he has.
I think affirmative action wasn't really supposed to, like, send kids to Harvard that weren't prepared to go to Harvard. I think that's quite a myth, in fact. I think those that have the qualities to get to Harvard were, before affirmative action, were just completely overlooked.
That's
like Clarence Thomas
true
is like the perfect example. Regardless of what you think about him. He was able to get to Harvard because of affirmative action, because,
I mean, that's a good point too. Like, for all we know, Thomas Sowell might be right, But overall, it still might be beneficial, even if some kids end up getting, or if some young people end up getting put in less than ideal scenarios. It might be better for most people. So
it focused on finding people that were, again, like just overlooked.
But things ended up changing. It morphed into something else. So what started out as a good program of giving all black people or people with a lesser chance or lesser opportunity, it started out as that, and then it morphed. And I'm not sure who morphed.
It's morphin' time.
But it morphed into, okay, so now we have to have one black, one Hispanic, one this, one that.
That's not how that works.
But hey.
I guess it kind of, but that's how it's always worked, right? It's not like now it's like that's how it's always worked, right? It's always set some form of a quota. So, yeah.
Talk to the corporations, talk to the people who hire, talk to the board members who say we need to have a woman on the board, we need to have a black on the board, we need to have a Latina,
Jesus.
a Latinx, whatever on the board. So it morphed from helping us into now
tokenization.
Yes.
So like that's how it's always been though. So this isn't like this isn't a strong argument. That's the whole point of like saying, hey, we need to set a quota because we're like these businesses aren't hiring minorities or marginalized groups. That's always been happening. The argument isn't that it does that. The argument is that it may not do it effectively anymore. That's the argument. So
you have to have one of this, one of that.
Well, when you start with a country where people only hire you if you're white, that's necessary. And I know that you said that it started good and then ended whatever. And I don't think that affirmative action was perfect by any measure, but we still see really, really bad inequalities. So if you're going to get rid of affirmative action, what's the replacement?
Meritocracy.
There's no meritocracy in this country. You look at Elon Musk, he's destroying Twitter.
There is meritocracy, but there's also nepotism as well. I believe meritocracy is that like when you get praised for your how well you do, or you get benefits for how well you do, which exists, but it's also nepotism that exists as well. Like it's a mixture of all those things, but it's not like a pure meritocracy, we'll say. Because like from a logical perspective, like you're probably more likely to want to hire somebody that comes from money. Like let's say your dad works for the company and he's really good at his job. His son has a higher likeliness of also being a good worker. So of course that's one of the aspects of nepotism.
There's no meritocracy. That's ridiculous.
Well, first thing I want to bounce back to is it's not a myth that there are like minorities that are being put into colleges that they're not ready for. If you look at a lot of these top universities, including Harvard, Yale, etc., you're going to see a lot of minorities on academic probation because they are being placed in universities that they are not ready for. They're not cut out for that just yet. And it even just makes sense if you look at how much they have to achieve in order to get there. Asian students on average have to score 450 points higher than a black student in order to get in the same university. So if you think of the universities that have courses, etc., that grade on a curve, you can only have so many people with an A, so many people with a B, etc. So that means that the bottom percentile is going to fail. Who is most likely?
Why can you only have so many people with an A? Theoretically, can't everybody get A's? What? Okay.
Just based on logic, going to be the ones failing. It's going to be the people who didn't have the credentials to get there in the first place. And then I have to bounce back to.
I want to get you on that point because I would posit that the people who are least likely to have good outcomes in an academic setting are those who have to work 2 jobs, are those who have to drive there from home because they can't afford a dorm, are those who have to go into crippling finance.
You know what could help solve that problem? It's called a universal basic income. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before. I'm back on the UBI train, baby. We're getting back into politics. Okay, it's political season. It's called a UBI, bitch. That could help a lot. All right, $1,000 a month. Depending on how you did it, that's a poker champion.
Financial debt. These are and have other stresses in their life. They can't afford a doctor. They can't afford a dentist. They can't afford anything.
I had to do
so
that too, though.
Those are the people.
That's not just black people. It's not just.
But it's overwhelmingly.
If we're numbers, there are more white people in poverty than black people.
If you look at the raw numbers.
Well, yes, of course, there's gonna be more white people in poverty than black people. We don't look at raw numbers. We look at proportionality. Proportionally, there are more black people are impoverished than white people. All right, we don't look at raw numbers.
But if you actually understand what you're talking about,
the issue is poverty in general, though. I don't think it's like who's in poverty. It's like poverty sucks.
Maybe we should make college free, and maybe we want to have affirmative action wouldn't be that necessary.
It'll get even more ghetto.
I mean, that might be true. There might be. I mean, a lot of other countries have some kind of college program. Here's my problem. Here's my thing. I don't think that you necessarily need to make college free. There are so many different solutions to every problem that you have. Right? I don't think that you necessarily have to make it free. But what I will say is this. UBI. No. What I will say is this. Is that there's multiple solutions to any problem. What you could do instead is that in America, one of the big problems is that we do have government subsidies for schools, which is not a bad thing. My understanding is those schools they still can charge whatever the fuck they want. So my understanding is that a third of the money comes from you, a third comes from the state, and a third comes from federal, at least for schools, for like state schools or whatever. If we said, hey, we'll give you government subsidies for your students as long as you keep your costs in a reasonable line. But you can charge whatever you want. We just may not cover it. You're gonna see a high, like a better. You're gonna see them have more reasonable prices. You know, I genuinely believe that. So maybe there's an alternative to necessarily making it all socialized. You know, maybe we just need to have a conversation about like the way that we deal with these situations. Maybe we have to have a conversation about how much like or the conditionality of the subsidy. That might be like the way to go. Honestly. So.
If you have a program that says if you are under a certain income level, this is how we'll help you, that will overwhelmingly help black people at a far greater percentage than it will help white people.
Yeah, sure.
Trump supports Black lives.
I mean, I don't know. I think he did that one bill that helped black people. Right? He worked with some black people. I forget what it's called. He did do something good for the black community. But I think that fundamentally, I don't think that he's good for poor people. And since poor people are disproportionately black, I think that's a problem. Again, the policies that he enacted for the economy were not good. They drastically increased the annual federal deficit by like $350 billion per year before COVID. It wasn't a good idea. Like, yeah, it did help some people because it stimulated jobs, but it was basically the same as if you go to the bank and take out a $10,000 loan and go, look, I just made $10,000. Like, it's just not true. It didn't have overall solid impacts. He also got rid of restrictions that were put in place by the Obama, the Obama administration. And the reason that they were put in place was because the administration before Obama, banks were destroying us. They were able to leverage like up to 30+ times their wealth on really risky loans, and if they failed, guess what? We had to bail them out. And so those restrictions getting pushed away, that hurts black people more too, because black people are less likely to be able to have less money, generally speaking, which means that they're not going to be able to deal with a recession nearly as well as, like, generally speaking, white people are. So is he for black people? I don't think that Trump is necessarily this huge racist. He's New York. He's a New Yorker. You know what I mean? He's just around too many Italians. He's just Italian racist, But I don't think that he's necessarily actively. I don't think that Republicans are really good for anybody but rich people, to be absolutely honest with you. So I wouldn't say that he's for really any. I just don't. Again, there's no Republican solution to any like actual problem. No healthcare solution, no poverty solution, just no solution. They're not good for anybody. That's unless you hate gay people, then they're great for that because that's pretty much their whole platform. Gay and trans people are bad. That's literally the entire platform. So. That's what I think about that. Damn. Wait. Why'd this guy sit down? Is he sitting down just to debate? Is this guy here for his 15 seconds of fame? What the fuck's happening? Why is he sitting down?
I think that President Trump supports all lives. I think that he looks at all American citizens as equal. I don't see him doing anything that would make you feel like he does not support Black lives. That's, of course, going to lead into the conversation of Black Lives Matter, which was a movement and an organization with so much corruption. Donald Trump not supporting that organization doesn't mean that he doesn't support Black lives. It just means that he doesn't support the fraudulent organization that's stealing so much money from so many people to do absolutely nothing with it, nor does he support a destructive movement that is destroying cities, communities, lives, etc. So I don't see why someone would think that President Trump doesn't support Black lives.
Okay.
I've heard him say he knows all the best black people. He has all the best black friends.
I can't tolerate this guy. What's going on with this guy?
I do support black people all the time. So sorry, that was a very bad impression. But I don't think Donald Trump wants bad things to happen to black people. So in that respect, I think he does support Black lives. But the other side of that is he's not really doing anything. He didn't do anything as president, certainly, to uplift black people.
The economy affects black people.
Yeah, I certainly disagree with that point. One of the biggest things.
Yeah, no, the economy, again, it was shit. Like, he didn't do a good job. It was all short-term gains. In the long run, it doesn't help. Like, it wasn't good. It was not sustainable ever. It and it enriched like rich people more than anything else.
What did he do for the economy?
Well, yeah, we'll get into that one later. One of the biggest things he did is he secured permanent funding for HBCUs, one of the largest increases we ever saw for HBCUs, personally done by his administration, among many other things. The First Step Act, which, there's a lot of debate about whether.
Wasn't that some kind of welfare for black people? I thought you said you didn't like that. What's going on there?
It was really the best thing to do, but that was definitely a kiss of love to the black race. Freeing
Kiss
Alice
of
Johnson
love.
for menial drug crimes she committed in the past that had her locked up. She did not get to see her family for years.
Yeah, but that's not like, okay, I did say I agree, but I agree in the sense that Donald Trump doesn't literally want bad things to happen to black people, like I think a lot of conservatives do. So I think that he just says the most, yeah, I do think that. I think he says the things that will get him elected. So I don't think that he has any personal grudges.
I mean, that's anybody. Like, that argument is... That's anybody. Okay.
Against certain, most people.
Okay.
He just has the most popular thing.
Who the fuck is this guy?
I think like Ron DeSantis would be, Ron DeSantis would be somebody that I think actually wants black people to be hurt. So by that standard, yeah, Donald Trump.
I don't think that necessarily. I think that like his policies in Florida are shit because he's so anti-woke that they're running defense for slavery. And which is they are, because I know people that the whole thing is like, no, black people learn skills when they're enslaved. It's just a stupid argument. It's a defense run for slavery. It's so anti-woke that you're pro-slavery, right? You wouldn't apply that to any other group of people that was like abused. If I was like, oh yeah, but like there's some skills that that women in abusive households learned. Like, no, there's not. Well, yeah, sure. If you wanted to be a fucking psychopath, I could come up with them. Well, they know how to be more subservient to their husbands. Isn't that like a fucking great value to people, right? No, it's insane. They know how to take a hit. Right? What I'm saying sounds disgusting. That's what it sounds like when you say that there was like positives to fucking slavery. There's no actual benefit. It really is a defense run because it's so anti-woke. It becomes like fucking pro-racist. So
Trump supports Black lives by leaps and bounds.
You think Donald Trump says the most popular thing?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Then why do so many people?
Donald Trump appeals to like a populism. What you would say. He doesn't say the most popular thing. But when his policies appeal to what people, conservative populism, what people on the conservative side think is happening, like promoting like COVID conspiracies, promoting climate change conspiracies, promoting that like there's fucking deep-seated government. And I'm not saying that there isn't government corruption, but I mean, let's be honest. I think we see most of it. We're one of the most transparently corrupt countries. Part of that is when we give tax cuts to fucking billionaires, right? But pushing all these conspiracies, and there's not necessarily, again. Billionaires are a fucking issue. There definitely is corruption in the government. But when he pushes these conspiracy theories, it makes it seem like the only reason he didn't get elected is because of that, despite the fact that he literally got elected once before. So it doesn't really track. Yeah, no. He appeals to like populist ideas, populist conservative ideas of like anti-establishment. Even though they love to glaze fucking billionaire business owners.
People hate him.
He got elected as president.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He didn't win the popular vote. Neither time.
That's a liberal talking point. That's a liberal talking
I'm helping you here. I'm trying to see the logic in this. Obviously, he says things to be elected as a politician very similarly to how Joe Biden did, except Joe Biden actually has a history of racism.
Alex, you should have let me on. You should have let me on instead of Alec. What are you doing here? What is this? Who is this guy?
If he said things that people didn't like, he wouldn't have been our president.
So you like everything that Donald Trump says? You think everything he says is popular?
I love a lot of the things he says. I think he's hilarious. When he said big water, that was one of my favorite quotes. Big water.
Water, big water, ocean water.
He has the funniest one-liners, so I love a lot of the things he says. As far as policy, he sucks. But
who the fuck is this guy?
Hunter Biden hat. He likes a different kind of one line.
Oh, I know conservatives love talking about his.
No, Coke. It's different. Coke. Not.
No, conservatives love talking about Hunter Biden's cock. Absolutely, but sure.
Trump is less of the issue and more so the people that support him, like Die Hard. They facilitate that kind of like hate, I think, for a lot of people, not just black people, but like.
I mean, this man took out like a full page in a newspaper calling for the public execution of 5 black kids. His hotels, all of his businesses have rampant.
Wasn't that like a while ago? Didn't everybody? I forget who it was. Was it? This is the Brooklyn 5? Is that what they're talking about? That happened a long time ago. That am I wrong? I could be so uneducated on this. I'm thinking that's what it had to do with, and they were like innocent. But I think that was like the general sentiment from everybody. It wasn't like specifically Trump. Am I wrong about that?
History of denying black people apartments or whatever. So
I forgot about that. I should not have stepped forward.
Look, I mean, Donald Trump cares about Donald Trump.
I like that Destiny's wearing a Destiny shirt.
So I don't think he really cares about anyone, I guess, unless you're like super rich or whatever.
When you look at his history on racial issues, whether it's the shithole countries comment, the plethora of comments he made about Mexican people, just the comments he made about Muslims, the idea that Trump cares at all about some particular racial minority, I think is a little bit silly. I think Trump will say whatever he needs to say to rile up his base and to get elected.
I don't necessarily think those statements come from a place of hatred. I don't think he was ever saying specifically, oh, if you pray 5 times a day towards the east or towards Mega based on wherever you are, you're a bad person. I think he was saying you like to fly planes into towers or behead people or throw people off of buildings. Maybe you're not the most virtuous person out there.
I think that what a lot of people this is one of the things. Let's say Donald Trump was like the most like he was being the most charitable to him that you possibly could, and say like no, he had no like intention of being like disrespectful. Might be true. What people hear is that he's trying to be racist on both sides. It's a dog whistle to some people, and they're like, oh my God, I love Trump for saying that, like, minorities are bad, even if he didn't mean it. And one of the things is, like, you need to be more responsible with your platform. Like, the fact that Donald Trump doesn't understand that what he could say could rile people up, even if he doesn't mean it, that's the problem, no? That's a huge problem. Like, he didn't know what he was saying. He means he's stupid. That doesn't speak well to him. So
I supported Trump because he made the economy good, and so the economy then impacted black people,
Alexander
white people,
Frisbee
Latino.
became a member.
Oh God, it's doing the refresh for a bunch of people. Thank you so much for the people that have refreshed too. I'm gonna skip through them now. Holy moly.
It impacted everybody, but Trump. He didn't think specifically, I don't think, about black people. He thought about himself, and he thought about how can I make America great for me? And making and I thought, you know what? I'm gonna go with this guy. And the reason I'm gonna go with this guy is because
I mean, I agree. He wanted to focus on making it better for him, a small business owner, or small business owner. He only got a small business loan of $1 million from his dad. A business owner, a rich billionaire business owner.
If he can make America great and he can make that it rise for everybody, I'm going to benefit from that. So that's why I went, and that's why I voted for him. That's why I supported him.
How does that specifically benefit black people? Again, he's a businessman, but he's also a racist businessman, like well documented. So,
a based
so like
businessman.
And Biden's not. Biden's not.
Yes.
I mean, Biden said some dumb shit for sure. He probably doesn't have the same history though.
He created the crime bill.
Well, the crime again. A lot of black people supported the crime bill. I don't think that was a racist thing. I think it ended up hurting, disadvantaged people, mostly black, but it doesn't make it racist. There was no actual tension. Again, that's how the system folds in on us.
So that's regardless of the point.
Address the Central Park 5. That's what you brought up, right? How do you feel about that?
Well,
Central Park 5, right? That's what it was. That's what it was.
Okay, so I haven't.
He wanted them to be killed, executed, just because they were black.
That story.
And he bars people from attending his businesses or renting apartments from all his stupid Trump towers. I
think Trump at that.
So thank you so much for the 9 month sub, Devin Armstrong. I hope Poggers at UBI is back. Happy 9 months. Thank you.
That point was, like many people in this room, particularly liberals, a victim of the media. I think he was scared. I think he was ashamed of the.
This is the person that Trump appeals to, conspiracy theorists. Honestly, this guy's a conspiracy theorist. The way he interprets information is just very conspiracy-esque. So.
Things that he heard in the news and wanted to take action himself as a businessman, not as a
Why
racist.
are you infantilizing him?
I don't like real quick, because people keep bringing up this comparison to the '93 crime bill from Biden. That crime bill, this was at the height of violent crime and the crack epidemic in the United States. The Congressional Black Caucus supported that crime bill. Everybody in the United States supported that crime bill. The idea that crime bill was
Shut up, Alex.
a racist piece of legislation that Biden was just wheeling out because he hates black people, and that's somehow comparable to the Donald Trump's treatment of the Central Park 5 that were already exonerated. That wasn't a victim of the media. The media said they were.
Oh, they were already exonerated? He's okay. Maybe I just don't know dick about shit about that fucking Central Park 5.
They were done. They were exonerated in court, but they weren't there.
As I understand it, the prosecutor of the 5, he was a black guy, and so in being a black guy, he went and he looked at all the evidence and said these guys are guilty.
Black people can also be racist against other black people.
Or just make mistakes.
So
yeah, I like that. That was beautiful from Destiny. It's a hard, from an optics perspective. I know I said something about that before, but I said it's not always bad. That's just not a battle that you want to take. It's not even a worthwhile battle with conservatives, regardless of the color of their skin, to say that black people can be racist to black people. It's true, but you're never gonna convince them, because that's understanding understanding that type of racism. It takes. You have to be much more on board with a more progressive ideology to understand that different systems can make black people dislike other black people. It's not even worth it. It's not even worth it to engage with that.
If anybody does anything you disagree with in regards to the Central Park 5, even if they themselves are a black person, they're just a self-loathing black person, they're just a racist black person.
If they disagree with me, they're racist.
That prosecutor was doing his job.
That's my policy. If they disagree with me, they're racist.
I think Trump has shown a history of ignorant at best and racist at worst behavior. I didn't vote for him or Hillary because I just don't see him as a conservative hero. I don't even think he's a conservative.
Fake conservative. I voted Trump in 2016, just so you all know. So
I don't know. Who is this guy? I'm not a big fan of this guy. Alec. I don't know. He's just dude, how did they let this guy on there with 2,000 followers but not fucking pop a gut? God damn it, bro. Fuck.
Just saying.
So I need to elaborate on if people disagree with you, they're racist, just in general.
The Central Park 5 prosecutor was not black. It was a white woman, but that doesn't matter. Oh, I think it does matter.
You never know. Just like that. Sorry if I triggered you. I'm sorry.
You made a point. You made a point a couple minutes back where you said he just kind of says these things to rile up his base. Why does he need to do that at the expense of black people then?
He doesn't do that I am a member of his base, and I'm sitting there like, oh man, this is amazing. And I don't know, you can call me
So
self-loathing, you can call me self-hating,
so you're
you can call
saying
me
calling
racist.
for the public execution of 5 black men that were exonerated to
When has
rile
he
up
done
his
that
base?
during the campaign trail? He didn't do that when he was a politician.
Well,
He did that when
again,
he was a
it's
scared businessman
everything.
in New York.
It's
Even
everything
that.
Steve said about the comments about Muslims, the comments about Mexican immigrants. Why does
never
he
about Mexican immigrants, never about Muslims, about terrorists and about criminals and rapists. These are very important delineations to make. And if you believe
I
that,
think
what
you
fed the media
understand,
about,
or
oh, it's all
I think
Mexican immigrants.
Well, he made like a broad scale statement saying that people from like the Mexico are sending like rapists and whatnot, and it does give the idea that like a lot, like there's a lot of them are rapists. So even if he didn't mean to say it like that, again, that's going to end up being interpreted differently by different people. And a lot of people, especially a lot of racist people, and I'd argue there's more racist people or more actively racist people who are conservative, let's be honest, are going to eat that up as like a dog whistle to be like, oh yeah, see, he doesn't like black people, right?
I think it's more of you being, oh man, these poor Mexicans, they need to be supported. It's more of that savior complex. Wow,
what was the
we're back
rationale
again.
behind axing or trying to axe DACA? Were these people were registered with the federal government, they were in school, they were doing everything that they needed to do. They had no home elsewhere. They were brought into this country as minors. Like, what's the explanation?
I think that requires more nuance. Like I mentioned before, I think there were some people. I think there were some people feeding him bad policy advice, thinking, "Oh, this will be really good for your base," and he's doing a lot as a president.
That's okay. That's okay.
But that's you agreeing that he'll just appeal to his base. Okay.
Okay, if we feel that way.
So if I take responsibility for something, if I say he has responsibility for something, well then you're right. But if I'm saying, well, maybe there are some people around him advising him falsely, it's
yeah, because he ran as a fucking conservative. he ran as like listen, I understand there's an immigration problem, but like no shit, it doesn't matter where the bad policy advice comes from. He's still responsible for the advice. It sounds like anytime he makes a mistake, you just glaze the fuck out of him.
He was the president.
There's no good way.
He called the shots. What are you talking about?
The only path forward to solving illegal immigration starts with amnesty for everybody here.
Hey, thank you so much.
Became a member.
Thank you so much for the membership. Thank you.
The reality is there's some 10 to 15 million illegal immigrants here. We're not deporting them all.
With the people who are already here, that's...
Oh, well, I wanted to see what Disney had to say more about that. They cut him off, though. Yeah, we're probably not. I mean, the reality is it's good for business. It's an unfortunate reality. I think ideally we should, ideally we shouldn't have like illegal immigration. We need to have strong and protected borders. Damn, I just got so lucky there. But yeah, like, I mean, there's only so much you could do. I don't think that going after people in DACA was the way to go with that. Like, that doesn't make any sense. We're talking about people who were, like he said, brought here as minors. They were already pretty much inside the system. They were American. Like, they're born and bred basically in America. This is all they knew. It made no sense to go after them specifically.
A lot more of a messy, nuanced conversation. But as far as people coming in, I do think we need stronger borders and actual vetting happening.
And just to keep in mind, Joe Biden got Mexico to agree to pay $1.5 billion for border wall security. So better than Trump.
I just want to say, in Ronald Reagan's day, he was given the promise. He said, look, if you go ahead and you pass this particular...
Didn't Reagan fuck up the economy? Like put everything, or he created the parameters that allowed so much wealth disparity nowadays? What the fuck? Oh, I did not mean to do that. So I don't know, man. I wouldn't glaze that guy too much.
Particular bill. We'll give these people amnesty and we're done. And it didn't happen. We didn't. Illegal immigration continued even after Reagan already said we will give these people amnesty. So that's why we get a burr up our butt, because he had already done it.
Hopefully the devil's giving him amnesty.
True.
That's terrible.
No, that's based. Thank you.
Tasteless.
Based.
Wow.
Ninth circle, baby.
My political beliefs have changed from the past.
I mean, that's a pretty vague question. I've always been more like when I didn't care about politics, I just didn't care about politics. And then when I got into them, I've always been like relatively left leaning. If anything, like I don't think I've changed. I've just gotten better at my arguments, I think, honestly. Am I gonna want any pasta from the party? No, just not pasta, but meatballs and stuff, baby love.
I grew up in a conservative household, actually, in Ohio. And
by the way, I also grew up in like a more conservative household. We never really discussed politics. It's just not something that we ever really talked about. It's not something that's particularly important to my mother to like have me agree with her on. So
parents were always pretty political, so I always stayed political. I was very religious as a teenager. Sometime during college and then afterwards, especially during COVID, my sister actually indoctrinated me into a more leftist position.
Holy fuck!
And, I overcorrected a little bit. I started becoming pretty cringy as far as like,
You think I've become more progressive since my channel started? How? In what way? Like, I don't think that that's true. I think that I care a little bit less about making conservatives feel comfortable. Because I think that, like, when I first started my channel, I had a little more hope for the fucking Republican Party, and now it's just a disaster area. I don't think that I've gotten more progressive at all. I think I've been pretty, like, I've been consistent. It's just hard to give a fuck about a party who doesn't give a fuck about us or anybody else. I mean, we're at that point. There's nothing left. It's worked with science deniers, global warming deniers, COVID deniers, individuals who have no interest in trying to make healthcare better, individuals who have no interest in trying to make people's lives better that are at the lower end of the system. I don't think it has anything. I don't think I've gotten progressive at all. I think I've been pretty consistent. I think I have a little less empathy for conservatives nowadays. And I think it's because the conservatives become fucking psychotic. Like, they're fucking psychopaths. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. I'm not trying to be a fucking asshole. My policy, I'm the same on, like, everything. There's not a single issue that I've really moved on. That's really what it comes down to. So, I mean, you have a fucking group of people who are saying, you have a group of people who believe in a Bible that says that children can be raped. Hey, when a kid when the kid becomes old enough to start bleeding as a girl, they can get married. They can marry an adult. That's a book of grooming, and they're saying that fucking LGBTQ people are pushing grooming. Like, it's insane. These people are fucking psychotic. They're more concerned about some fucking dude in a dress reading a book to people than they are with actual issues going on. It's no. It's like, well, that's what it comes down to. You know, I'm not trying to be a fucking dickhead, but, like, I have not shifted. The party shifted. You saw a mass exodus of, like, reasonable conservatives leave because of how, like, how they're psychopaths. So, yeah. I'm also dead.
Let the minorities all talk, right? Don't say anything, don't speak over them, etc. They would, it was like the whole, you can't speak over Candace Owens, even if she's literally...
I understand you're saying some Christians and not all. I understand it's not all Christians, but they're still voting for the fucking psychopaths that are trying to take away gay marriage and trying to, like, call gay people groomers. If you're voting Republican, whether you like it or not, when the mainstream Republicans are calling LGBTQ people fucking groomers, you're supporting bullshit. So it's like, yeah, they might not actively have that in their head, but you're still voting for the fucking psychopath. So what am I supposed to do with that information? So
Nazi kind of thing. So I stand by that. So yeah, I kind of leveled out, thankfully, and I'm less cringe now.
Did you? Are you?
I'm definitely not less cringe.
Not imagine if we would have been here a year ago.
I mean, maybe I am being cringe. Who cares?
So I grew up conservative, but I did have more left-leaning ideas about, like, Black Lives Matter and critical race theory, and I was watching a lot of YouTube, and I did agree that Black people were oppressed and all of these different things, and that we were kind of got the short end of the stick. And during 2020, when there was everything crazy was happening, and I started organizing rallies against the mandates because I thought that they were just totally unconstitutional and un-American. And then George Floyd dies. And initially I was, like, enraged like everybody else. And then it started to become this weird, like, political, like, agenda.
I don't think you shifted a ton, but you used to be more anti-body positivity and used to be more non-affirming and non-binary people. Oh, yeah, I guess that's true. Okay. Well, let's just cut the rant out that I had. I'm just kidding. That is a little more true. I'm a little more empathetic. That's how I've changed. I don't think I guess that would be considered a political shift. I consider it just more empathy. Because I have more conversations with my wife, and I appreciate her perspective more, so I've become more empathetic as I got older.
The masquerading behind his face, like, the face of what was actually happening started to peel off, and I was like, oh, I mean, I would counter-protest BLM activists at my town square when I lived in Texas, and they were some of the most just bitter, vile, horrible people you could ever meet. Meanwhile, like, the Confederate group that would protest there against them also, they were, like, the nicest people ever to me, ironically.
Okay. I grew up in a
well, it's probably because you agreed with their perspective. But okay, fair enough, sure.
Democratic, not a Democratic household, but kind of apolitical, but everybody was Democrat. And then I got a job. And when I got a job and I saw all the taxes come out, and I started looking to the left and to the right and going, oh, my money's whittling away over here.
Fuck, it's the taxes. Listen, I don't give a fuck about paying taxes. I have no issue paying taxes. It's annoying that we don't know if our taxes are being used properly when we can't get a proper audit on our fucking military. Like, yeah, I'm pretty irritated, but taxes overall are a good thing. I wish they were, I wish that they were, like, actually go to better shit. And a lot of the problems is, like, military spendings and things like that. I'm not saying don't spend money in the military. I'm saying that we can't even get a fucking audit on the military. So how are they probably abusing their shit? Right? So that's my perspective more than anything else. But taxes overall, like, taxes are a good thing. It's a good thing to pay taxes. It's a good thing to give back to communities, your own community. It really is not, like, this horrible bad thing. So, Oh shit, that was fucking based.
And I said, you know what? After Reagan, I'm just going to go ahead and declare myself a Republican, and I've been a Republican ever since.
My mom is pretty liberal. She married my stepdad when I was like 15, 16 in high school, and he's super conservative, like loved Trump, diehard Trump fan. And they had a lot of like back and forth, hearing the two sides, like people who are on such polar opposites, just like argue all the time about stuff. Seeing that there's a lot of similarities in both sides, like the far radical left and the far radical right, they have a lot of similarities. They just don't want to come and like see it.
I started off actually kind of similar to you. I went to a Jesuit high school. I grew up very conservative. My mom is Cuban, so ride or die Bush supporter, who is now a ride or die Trump supporter. I think the point in my life when I was the most like libertarian was probably the lowest point in my life financially.
What the fuck? Did they add that? Why?
Actually, and I think it's because something that conservatives do really well is
the
that you feel like you can
sound.
always like succeed as long as you work hard enough. And that's something that progressives and liberals suck at. That you're a victim of systemic racism, you're black, so you're going to be discriminated against, you're a woman, so nobody's going to care about your feelings, etc.
That's true. I mean, I understand what you're saying. Like, I think that there is a difference between acknowledging a potential, like, identification with potentially being a victim versus always attributing that to that. I would say that there's too much of a lens nowadays of looking at everything that gets all racist. I think it's gone like too far. It's annoying when like nowadays if you go to the grocery store, if you accidentally cut a black person off in the fucking traffic, now you're racist. Like, oh my god, I can't believe you did that. You're racist. No, I know I'm not. I'm just an asshole when I'm driving. You know. So I can agree with like part of that. I can agree with part of that. Oh fuck, I'm gonna die.
Et cetera, et cetera. Whereas Republicans will tell you, listen, if you work hard, you can do whatever you want, like just as long as you're willing to put in the work. And I felt that way up to the moment where I was losing my house, where I had an ex-girlfriend that was pregnant, where I had been fired from my previous job. There was a whole bunch of horrible stuff going on in my life, and I very, very luckily got into online content creation. And from there, as I started to make more money, I started to pay more taxes. When I get older and I look at taxes that come out of my paycheck, I mean, I care a little bit, but it was just so funny to me that back when I was making $15,000, $20,000 a year, I'm like, I gotta vote for the lower tax bracket, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm barely paying any taxes anyways. And you know, now that I'm older, like if the government wants to take, you know, a few, you know, 10, 20, whatever, how many more $1,000 out.
You just said you worked hard.
I did, but I got very, very, very lucky doing so. Very lucky.
Yeah, I mean, getting lucky doing, like, Destiny's a smart guy, but like overall, it's lucky doing content creation. Like me too. I'm not even a smart guy, but I got lucky. I was like a fucking dead-end job at a company that was stripping away my benefits. And I was able to get into online content creation. And now I make like decent money and I work not nearly as much as I used to. Like, yeah, it's all like, yeah, you might work hard, but it doesn't mean that you're not fucking, like, it's not all hard work. You know, you obviously you want to work hard, but it's not just hard work. It's a lot of other stuff too. Why would you do that?
It's not just luck, but the difference is that born into a wealthier family, you can make so many more mistakes in life. And when you're born poor, you get like one or two before your life is over.
True.
And that's really sad to me.
Yeah, so I used to be a liberal. I voted for Bernie Sanders in 2016, as much as I regret that now. My family was pretty left-wing.
Why? Bernie's based. Even if I don't necessarily agree with all his policies, he's like the most genuine person like I've ever seen in like in general. So why?
Some of the people in my family were like radically left, like would refer to white people as blue-eyed, redheaded devils, things of that nature. And as I got older,
redheaded devils, dude. What the fuck? Listen, I don't know why you'd say anything about redheads. I feel like redheads and black people are very close. I feel like every single redheaded person that I've ever seen that's not dating another white person, or rather not dating another redhead. No, just, you know what? I don't think I've ever seen a redhead not be with a black person. I don't know what it is. You know, I feel like there's something there. Somebody study that. Somebody study that. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's fine, but I don't understand. I wonder why. I really do. I don't get it. I really don't understand. Yeah, it's Irish hate. True.
I actually started being really outspoken for BLM. I was supposed to be on a reality show teaching people how to be a BLM activist.
Oh,
At
shit.
the time, I did a deep dive on BLM, and I started to realize all of these lies. So then I took a step back. I'm like, okay, what else?
Is that true, or is this guy just realized he'd make more money being a conservative? Like, I'm not even trying to be an asshole. I mean, it sounds like he's always been like political. So
lied to about, and I started looking at the Democratic Party and questioning my own loyalty to being on the left.
I personally think both sides tend to be racist in different ways. I don't think the government is on the side of the people in general, and that's just me being, you know, a radical.
When I was young, I used to jump for joy and say, oh yeah, Obama, black president, that's so amazing, he's the same color as me. But when I started to do more research, one of the biggest things I was confused about is, well, why is he a Democrat? What is a Democrat? I did more research about the Democrat Party, and sure, you guys are going to pop off about
and they used to be racist, and that's how they always are to me. This guy
head saying, oh, there's a party switch in the Southern strategy and all.
Yeah, see, he's just constantly gonna say the same fucking thing. I don't even know. What is he saying? He's babbling.
These things,
which is true.
Which you may say is true. I don't believe it is true at all.
It is. It's just so. It's objectively true that there was a party switch. Like, you can't say no. Like, we're beyond this. Who are the most racist people in America historically? Who was the side of the South that wanted to maintain slavery? People who flew the Confederate flag. Okay, nothing's changed. Those people vote Republican now. That's it. That's all the information we really need to know. Obviously, there was a party switch. It's not even worth debating. It's weird.
I understand, you may think I'm wrong.
You are.
However, one of the biggest questions I had was, why is Obama in the same party as the people that started the KKK, the same people that voted against the Civil Rights Act, the same people that are on the news talking about how black people aren't able to accomplish anything and need to be on welfare and need to be promoted with affirmative action and things of that nature?
I also, in terms of, I guess, of my political journey, I was raised conservative, actually. And then high school became, I guess, sort of apolitical. And then
if your entire reason for being like a Republican is because like they started, I don't know, they fucking started being racist. I mean, Democrats started being racist. I mean, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. It's like weird. Yeah, sure, but now they're not. It's the Republican. If that's his entire ideology, like it's just he's lost in the sauce. He's unreasonable.
And throughout college, and I guess just throughout my life since then, I think I guess you can call me a progressive, you can call me, socialist, whatever you, but I guess that's, in the area of where I fall. You said that you were a Bernie fan in 2016, and then you transitioned to being, I guess, more conservative. I guess, I don't know, to me, Bernie Sanders, from what he said to what you think now, what was the shift?
For me, it was socialism, because back then I was a very
socialism, bro. We already have socialism. We have corporate socialism in America. It's happening. So
broke college kid, and I just had this mentality that everything should be free, and I was feeling a bit entitled, like everything should be handed to me because I was black, because I was very much in that mentality. As I learned more about free markets, as I learned more about capitalism, I started to appreciate that much more. I started to appreciate small business much more, limited government, low regulations. I just started to like that much more. But I would say just more when it comes to economics, I don't agree with him.
Reparations are necessary.
I mean, I'm assuming we're talking about for black people. Listen, man, here's my stance on reparations. Black people probably deserve reparations, but we're at a point now where I just don't think that it would be the most constructive way to operate. I just don't. I think that at the end of the day, a lot of time has passed. We'd be better off focusing on people who are oppressed more than just black, right? They might have a higher chance of being oppressed, but the reality is we should focus on poor people. And so let's implement things that help poor people. That's it. Fucking Jada Smith doesn't need reparations, I would say that most racism goes away if we reduce that wealth gap. So, because you'll have more money to fight against racism. The reality, that's how it kind of starts. Instead of trying to legislate it away, which I'm not saying is a bad idea, give people the tools to fight racism. Having more money the black community gives them a better opportunity to fight racism. It means more education for other black people that understand other black experiences, have better lawyers that will be able to argue the system better, et cetera, et cetera. What about UBI? That's the thing. I think give people the tools to help their lives more than anything else.
Talk about reparations. I think that doing reparations in the way that a lot of people think of it, where we just give it to black people. I'm not an expert on this.
Well, that's what we're getting out of it. I don't like the progressive argument. Like, okay, just gonna keep listening.
But I think it would be more income based, and that in itself, like I said earlier,
that's not reparations.
Would disproportionately benefit black people, because if you recognize that they are disproportionately affected by a systemic injustice.
We know that people are hearing, when you hear that, when they hear reparations, they're hearing like reparations for like black struggles. That's what they're hearing more than anything else, right? And so to be like, no, I think that we need reparations for poor people. Like, you wouldn't really call those reparations. We know what we're talking about, and I don't like it when we pretend we don't know what that did not help them at all.
Then doing it on like a class level would uplift proportionally more black people than white people or any other race.
Yeah, I feel
like this guy's just sitting on the agree side sometimes just so he can get more screen time. Which, by the way, I guess I can't disrespect it. He's just trying to get himself out there. So I guess you gotta respect the struggle, the grind.
Like mostly like black GIs that were left out of like the New Deal, for instance.
Yeah, sure.
That to be able to come back and as a white American, as a white vet.
It's fucked up. Like, there was like a lot of housing that was gotten because of the GI Bill on Long Island, especially in Levittown, and black people just weren't able to get it. It's fucking crazy.
And to get a home loan and then build that generational wealth, you could not get that as a black American. So
maybe they should just identify as mug-blooded Americans. You know what I'm saying? I'm a mug-blooded American. Okay, I gotta stop doing that. That's cringe.
Needs to be. I think reparations. I don't care really what form it comes from. I think free healthcare, free college, so that everyone has like an equal opportunity to educate themselves, to build a better life for themselves. So it's sort of like. And I think Germany is also a perfect model to follow, by issuing, first of all, a formal apology, which we.
I'm pretty sure that the way that Germany does the reparations, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was that they gave money to like Israel, and then they helped, right? So that, and they sent Jewish people out. Am I wrong about that?
haven't even done that. But also just like donating to like different funds, and just I think a more equitable society striving for that is reparations in and of itself.
I have no problems with reparations if they had happened initially during the slavery or the civil rights movement or any of that. But to try and do that now logistically just doesn't really make any sense. And like, where would this money come from? Like, we're in so much debt.
Well, taxes. And the reason we're in debt is because every conservative that comes in increases a deficit, right? Deficit is the amount of money we owe over the amount of money we're taking in. Debt is the accumulation of how much money that we've owe. Conservatives, ever like the last, what was it, 7 conservatives have increased the fucking, or 7 conservative presidents have increased the deficit, while the last like 7 Democrats have reduced it. Obama inherited a $1.4 trillion annual federal deficit and reduced it to $650 billion. Trump increased it back to $1 trillion before COVID. So like, so yeah.
As a nation, would I get this money? I'm biracial or triracial. Like, do mixed people get it? And like, do Irish people get reparations when they were indentured servants?
I think for reparations, if you can find specific instances of somebody being like actually deprived of something, whether specific instances of like the 40 acres and a meal promise, or whether you can find specific cases of like Chinese people building railroads or Irish people, whatever, people being deprived of things, that's okay. But otherwise, yeah, it's a logistical nightmare. There's no possible way that we'd be able to do it well.
Yeah, America's unique because we have bent over backwards for decades now, putting minorities in a position of privilege. I feel like we have done so much to give back to the communities that were obviously wronged. And I agree with both of you. Like, had this happened a long time ago, I would understand it. If we had specific incidences that we could trace where people were just completely screwed over, I would respect it. But right now, I don't deserve a payment for something my great-great-great-great-grandparents went through, and I don't think that white people are responsible for paying that to me either.
I know we don't want to use the word virtue signaling, but it's sort of like a bribe for a vote in a way, at least in my opinion. In states like California, where they've been throwing around the idea of, oh, we want to pay out this much money to every black citizen in there, in the state, it's like, oh, are you serious? Because this is kind of like a joke, in my opinion.
He might not necessarily be wrong. To me, it becomes a virtue signal in this instance when you can't do good on your promise. If you're like, yeah, vote for us, we'll do like a fucking, we'll help black people, we'll give them reparations, when you know it's not going to ever get passed because it's like it's a nightmare to like logistically, like they were saying. Like, yeah, that suggests to me that maybe it is a virtue signal. It says in rotate.
I think that if we impose reparations now, I think it would rip America apart. I think that we're already separated enough as it is, and now you're going to have people walking around going, "You owe me money. You owe me money. I'm not paying you any money." It would just
well, that's not okay. I was with her. That's not what's going to happen. There's not going to be people walking around being like, "You owe me money." What's going to happen is we're just not going to be able to really pay for it or really implement it, and all these other questions as well that they were talking about are just not going to be able to really be answered. So. Jesus Christ.
Really rip us apart.
Giving somebody money doesn't mean anything if they don't know what to do with the money or how to handle the money. So if the primary issue in black culture or with black people is generational trauma, then maybe they need more therapy than they need money.
I like half agree, but like also not necessarily. Like, I understand what she's saying. It comes down fundamentally like, how do you know people would use the UBI correctly if they got the money? I'd argue they probably wouldn't, not at first. It's not really about this generation. It's about like moving it forward. The reality is that we all use money incorrectly. Anytime you've ever gotten DoorDash, you've made a mistake with your money. I'm just letting you know. All right. Anytime that you haven't eaten a home cooked meal that's objectively cheaper, you've made a bad choice. Choices are bad whether if you have the money or not. That's the only difference between the choice. People want to make these choices, right? Giving people money to be able to make bad choices and recover. That's really what it boils down to. And then with more money is going to come more education, because you'll have more money, like again with UBI, you'll have more money centralizing around in these particular communities that are going to create more jobs and more wealth in general. That's really the focus that I come to. Like, yeah, give people the money to be able to make fucking mistakes. That's really what it boils down to.
Honestly.
Which conservatives are also against.
Well, that's kind of my argument. Like, if there is like that like generational trauma or whatever, like I think examples of like free healthcare, they could see a therapist and not be, fall into debt.
True.
And I think the argument of like the logistical nightmares of it, I think if we want to pay for something in this country, we usually find a way to do it, especially when it comes to the military. So, I mean, we pay for multi-billion-dollar jets all the time.
It's not the dollars, it's who's supposed to get them.
Yeah. Not to attack progressives, but that is like the most progressive idea in the world. Is like, I can see the headlines like reparations voted on in Congress to be paid in the form of free therapy for people in the hood. That just sounds like the funniest thing in the world. But
well, I also don't think it's going to come directly from like white person to black person. Like, oh, your lineage affected his lineage.
It is though. Like in San Francisco, they were going to raise the average family, or the average household in San Francisco was expected to pay $600,000 each with the $5 million per black person proposal that they had. And I used to live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was.
Well, the idea would be like if you The idea with that would be like the taxpayers paying for it. So
Pulsed by that.
that's why it would be an average of that much more, but just a lot of money, by the way. It's a ton of money.
You have so many homeless veterans on the streets, and they were going to give black people a home for as little as $1 just for being black.
Shit.
Mind you, slavery wasn't even in
I'm
California.
not really sure what he's talking about. I think he's talking about they had like a weird UBI they wanted to do in California, but it was like black only or something.
So why that was going to be the case, like, I don't understand, but it's extremely unrealistic to think that the average family in San Francisco can afford that.
That's because Newsom wants to get reelected.
Okay, but you don't really care about homeless veterans, right?
That's just
you
a
don't support.
You don't know
I feel like
me.
all your arguments are ad hominem.
But you're
Literally
here as a
every single one ad
You're here as a
hominem.
conservative. So what policies do you support?
I feel like his arguments overall aren't bad, but to be like, you don't care about homeless veterans, and I would say like, okay, like you're saying you care about homeless veterans, like what policies do you support that help homeless veterans? I feel like there's a better way to ask to say these questions, and you'd be like, no, I Republicans. Like, yeah, so what have Republicans done that have helped homeless veterans? Right? You know, like that's what you'd ask
For homeless veterans.
There's ways to address, I mean,
Specifically.
for homeless in general.
That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say that we didn't find a middle ground in there.
Yeah.
All right.
But that's a great ending note. White liberals have a savior complex.
Yeah, of course. Not all of them do. Some of them do. Alex does. I don't know. Some people do have a savior complex. Listen. The white liberals that have a savior complex are going to be the white people who are saying that, like, you can't be racist towards me. I'm white. Says that white people are, like, bad. That's the white people that they're just trying to distance themselves from their whiteness as a virtue. So they don't say, I'm one of the good ones, guys. Like, some do. Not all. Some do, though. Hassan. Pickler.
Well, I gotta say, this is a shock. I never expected all four of you to just come forward and admit it, but you know what? I'm happy with these results.
I just think it's a lot of people, I guess, people,
So
you know,
sweaty.
of the left, whatever, can kind of fall into that trap of
Jesus Christ.
thinking that, you know, black people as a monolith need to be saved as a whole.
I have no shame about it. I have a savior complex as an older brother, and I will save you whether you like it or not. So that's just me.
Well, it's definitely not, because a lot of us are really just exhausted of being viewed as our skin color. Because when you have this mindset that you need to save black people, and we're just sitting here minding our own business and living our lives the way we want to, I don't know why it is that people feel this immense pressure to be so apologetic and just always trying to cater and coddle to black people when we just want to be treated like everybody else. We're equal for a reason.
I think especially recently with a lot of riot stuff that's gone on or protest stuff that's gone on, people on the left tend to...
Yeah, there seems to be like some people, white people that go to these riots, and they, like Antifa members, they're mostly white, and they rile shit up because they're like, well, we're helping black people. Let's go destroy their community. You know what I mean? Like, let's go loot and riot and destroy stuff. That's helpful. That's a savior complex, right? It's like causing violence in the name of black issues. It's not because they don't care about black people. They care about causing problems and feeling justified in bullying shit and destroying stuff.
Infantilize a lot of different types of protesters, and especially even talking to, you know, some of the other black content creators I do content with, when you hear a lot of progressives come out and say, well, they don't have a choice but to riot or break into the store, or, well, they're stealing, you know, these electronics or shoes for good reasons, you just don't realize it. I think a lot of people kind of look both ways, and it's a little bit weird that there's such a complex on the left to excuse like every single possible negative behavior from somebody as long as they're a skin color that you're kind of in charge of protecting.
I find that very offensive.
He said he had Hassan in mind when he said that?
Yeah.
I find it
Really
extremely...
Hey, it was only a $3 bag of chips.
It upsets me to hear that because...
Yeah, no, I know what he means. Like, I understand. There's a difference between saying, like, look at all this looting and rioting happening here. This is happening to some degree because of systemic racism, and the way that I see it is that there are black people who just don't give a fuck about the government. They don't give a fuck about the rules. Police officers have treated them like shit. They hate the system, so they're angry and they might be lashing out at the system. That's one thing, but like, you have to punish people who steal, and you have to put them in jail. You know what I mean? So I can understand that systemic aspect, so we can address those systemic issues. But like, at the end of the day, people hit a point of no return. They have to be punished. So nobody's like destroying Target and stealing fucking, you know, TVs because like they're actively oppressed or anything, or like, you can't excuse that behavior. You know, if you go steal food, I kind of get it, but you still have to fucking put these people in jail and whatnot.
Because we're just like you. We just have a different skin color, and to hear that you have to help me is offensive to me. I can do it on my own.
Well, we have to break down sometimes why these riots happen. You know, MLK once said that riots are the voice of the unheard. So if you are to address the problem and stop the riots, you have to address the underlying inequality that has historically been pervasive. You know, even
well, no, you need to stop the riots by actively stopping the riots with police presence, and then looking at the systemic conditions that cause that, and then slowly working to fix those.
If you as individual people are doing fine and you don't want anybody else to get in the way of that, that's cool, and I'm not going to be the one to get in the way, but the disparities are undeniable.
So if you take pride in having like a white savior complex, what is it that you think that you're doing to save
oh, Jesus,
black
he does.
people, and what is it that you think that you're saving black people from?
I am trying to make the world a better place through whatever means I can. And
but you're doing it on the backs of us. I
wouldn't say so.
Yeah, I actually do.
I mean, you say that you're white saviors, so like, yeah, kind of doing it on the backs of them. I mean, so the way that they're going to interpret this is like, yo, you only care about black issues because it makes you look like you're a good person. That's literally it.
Feel like you want to be a savior and you're using me to make yourself feel good. That's what
How
I'm
am I hurting you?
Me personally, I would just be like, listen, I'm racist, and I still think we need to help black people. That's how you know I'm not a savior.
Come on, you're not letting me have my own voice. You're not letting me speak.
How? You're speaking now?
No,
you're cutting her off.
Yeah.
He is cutting her off like immediately. What do you mean, stop talking? What do you mean? How am I cutting you off?
Well, I feel like I have to.
Yeah.
No, you don't. You could just shut the fuck up and let her finish a sentence and then say something. And I understand that I interrupt people a lot. Or when I do videos, but in person, like I try to be better. You try to like, because I have like a lot of thoughts. I have like ADHD. It's actually literally sometimes I speak so I don't forget. But you have to let people speak and like say something and be like, okay, that's interesting.
Well, what's happening? I mean, you're speaking right now. You're speaking right now in this particular setting. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying is, like, you took it back to riots and so forth, and it makes it seem like the only way that we as black people can have a voice is by riots, and then you need to come along and you need to say, okay, poor little black child, let me help you, let me help you. That's offensive to me, and I feel like you're making yourself feel
at least he's honest, true.
Good about trying to help us. And
I also think that, like, when we talk about damage, I think especially when it comes to a lot of the shoplifting stuff that's going on in certain cities, you get a lot of white people that live in nice suburbs saying things like shoplifting is no big deal, that's fine.
True.
And you'll catch YouTube videos of them later on being in a Walgreens in like a shoddy neighborhood and they're like, man, why is the deodorant behind a locked case? It's very easy to sit behind. Like,
yeah, that's actually a good point too. A bunch of white people that live in nice areas are like, no, destroy your own poor community. It's perfectly fine. We don't care. Yeah. There's no skin in the game. I think that's part of it too. There's no skin in the game for some of these dirty white liberals. Goddamn.
Gated community and say, oh, well, you know, it's not a big deal, you know. They steal because they have to. Riots are the language of the unheard. I think people haven't read the full context of that quote. When MLK was saying riots are the language of the unheard, you need to address the underlying condition. He wasn't condoning the rioting. He was just understanding it.
Obviously,
yeah, that's fair. Exactly. Like I said before, you need to understand why the rioting is happening to address those systemic conditions, but punish people rioting.
There are a bunch of white people that feel they need to be a savior, but I think there's a difference between helping and saving. Like, I don't think I need to save black people, but I would tremendously love to help and make sure everyone has like equal outcome, or not equal outcome, but at least equal opportunity, which, in my opinion, I feel we do not have in this country.
Okay. This is awkward. Hi, guys. So I didn't step forward just because I don't want to broad brush all white liberals as having a white savior complex. I have experienced.
Who the fuck is this girl? I don't think this girl here has spoken a single time the entire time. What the fuck? At least Alex is advocating for himself and getting himself out there.
So I didn't step forward.
Am I going on Jubilee? Probably never, bro.
Just because I don't want to broad brush.
Hopefully when my wife and I are making like a lot of money, or a good amount of money, so we can both go to California for like a week, and then I could do the Jubilee, and then we can go to Disney California.
All white liberals as having a white savior complex. I have experienced white liberals who do have that, and they're very unpleasant people. But I don't think every single white person who's a liberal or who is an activist for BLM or any of those things necessarily has a white savior complex. I think that there's a lot of white people who genuinely think that black people are oppressed and they want to help, and that's what they're told.
What it seems like to me, when most people have savior complex, regardless of whom they're trying to save, it's like they're taking real pain and real trauma and using that as a way to push this political agenda, but also to alleviate themselves of whatever guilt that they feel unnecessarily.
I think that there's part of it. I think that everything is multifaceted. I think has she spoken a few times? I'm just not paying attention. Sorry. I guess I just thought she was Destiny because that's a woman stripper's name. They sound the same. I think part of it is that people in general want to be on the right side. And I think that some of the virtue signaling comes from that. The over-policing comes, like social policing comes from that. It's like, I want to do the right thing, and I'm gonna... But they forget the human element, that like people are human. They have their own life experiences that brought them to where they to be at the spot where they feel the way that they feel, whether it's good or not. And we should kind of like address that. You know?
Like, I don't know why a white person today would feel guilty for things that happened decades ago, let alone something that happened centuries
Today
ago.
we're going. I've never seen a white person say, "I personally feel guilty for slavery." Maybe they're out there, but I've never heard that.
Yeah.
Well, here's one thing I have an issue with some white people. It's that like is the reparations thing. Is that there are people who will be like, we should do reparations. I think black people need reparations. And then when they get pushed on it, they're like, yeah, when I say reparations, I mean we need to target the systems that disproportionately negatively impact black people. And you might think that that sounds nice, but again, we talked before about Donald Trump and like dog whistling and him saying things that are interpreted differently to different people and different audiences. And we have to be consistent. When you say reparations, black people hear money for me because like that's what it is. When you try to get nuance with it, but you use the framing of reparations and then you don't explain until you're pushed on what you mean by that, to me, that's just trying to emotionally invoke black people and virtue signal to them. They're like, no, I care about you. I want to give you money that you deserve. When you don't believe that, you're like, no, let's just attack the system. You should do that, but you understand what I'm saying? I think that it's like you know what you're doing in the way that you're framing what you're saying.
Second grade, when they taught us about slavery, almost every kid in my classroom would spend their entire time looking at black kids in that classroom. How
Yeah, well, I mean, you're a kid.
was I supposed to not think, wow, these people are feeling guilty for something that they have no involvement in and I have no
Every
involvement
kid in my
Second
classroom understood the context.
People hate feeling uncomfortable.
Well, I mean, yeah, those are kids. They're like, slavery was bad. Devin, you know what I mean? You look at him. I had a kid named Devin in my class. The point is, like, yeah, that's different. It's not like you feel guilty in school. You don't even know what guilt is as a child. Children are pieces of shit. It's more like you look over and you're like, damn. Like, oops. You know, you're just like, this is awkward. There's a black guy over there. We're learning about slavery. Fuck. You know? You know, but when that happens, when in my classroom, what I would say is I was like, no. I liked the German guy from Django. This way they cleared it up. I enjoy that character. That wasn't out when I was in school. So
Comfortable, and obviously you don't want to feel like the bad guy, and so I feel like it comes from a place of like, oh well, like,
oh, she's talking. Sorry.
let me make sure that I'm different and like I'm showing you that I want to like help you, but it comes across like I think it can land very poorly.
I'll tell you what, stop it. Stop it. Because what happens is when
Don't think the kids were feeling overwhelmingly generational guilt at the current moment. I don't think that's... Oh, generational guilt. Yeah, sure. No, I don't think kids are feeling generational guilt at all. No.
When you put yourself as the white savior, what you do is you elevate yourself above the black person because you feel that...
True. Yeah, I agree with this.
And like, you have to save us.
Again, like, especially before, I was talking about... I understand that systemically white people aren't targeted by racism, but individually, you can be racist to white people. And one of the issues I have with the you can't be racist to white people is that you're setting white people at a higher standard. You're saying that if white people are prejudiced to any other group, that's racist and they're wrong. But if any group is prejudiced towards them, it's not racist. That behavior isn't as bad. You're not condemning the still very bad behavior of being racist towards another group of people. You're holding white people to a higher standard. And you're infantilizing black people when you do that. That's why I have an issue with stuff like that. Like, you shouldn't be... You're infantilizing a group of people. You know, and you might be like, yeah, but there's more of a justifier for black people being racist. Maybe. I mean, maybe. You know? But that's how everything kind of folds in on itself. A white black person might have had a really bad experience with white people, like police officers, for instance, would might help like make them not like white people. White people might have bad experiences with black people too. You know? We don't really know, but those bad experiences come from a very complicated systemic, like historical systemic perspective, right? And so like when you look at it, you go like, this is racist behavior, and then you can address it in a nuanced way, right? That's how you would operate with this. But it's still racist, right? So, and again, I've never heard somebody say you can't be racist to white people that wasn't trying to justify prejudice towards white people.
So just stop it. Just treat everybody regular and normal, just like...
You were all black in your class? That's crazy.
Like, just like I would treat you regular normal, you treat us regular normal rather than trying to save us.
I just got one thing.
I like her eyes. That was weird. But
I wanted to bring up earlier about taxes, because you were saying that you
taxes are based.
You had your job and you were talking about how like you get the tax every time and you're like seeing your tax go up. I worked in nursing homes in 2020 COVID.
Okay.
The last thing that was on my mind when I watched 60 and 70-year-olds on their deathbeds suffocating to death was taxes.
I don't care about anything that he's saying because I don't think that this is like genuine. I'm not trying to be an asshole. I feel like I'm not saying he didn't work in nursing homes and he didn't see people die. That's sad as fuck. But I feel like this is like this is a pure virtue signal. This guy from the start has been promoting his channel, and I don't even necessarily disagree with the promotion of your channel. I get it. Okay? I get it. But also, shut up. I just don't think, I think this is a performance.
I was worried about healthcare. I didn't give a shit about taxes in that time. So when I
Destiny, grill him on this.
go to work every day, that's what I see. That's what I want to fix.
Damn, that's crazy, bro.
I see you once again elevating yourself above the rest of us, and particularly at me, a white man elevating himself above a black person.
He called me a bootleg.
I love that. I love Renee, dude. She's the fucking GOAT, dude. Holy shit.
Sorry.
He called me a bootlicker.
Oh, no, I triggered them.
He called him a bootlicker. There you go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
not
sorry.
I'm chilling, buddy.
Yes,
So what
you
I
are.
hope comes out of this
chilling.
conversation is that we're all Americans, and because we're all Americans, we know that.
Bro, that was just so not genuine. You know what I mean? It just didn't sound genuine. When I was working in the nursing home, and there were old people on their fucking deathbed. Like, I don't think that you feel that way. Like, you could have communicated, like, listen, man, when I was working during COVID, the last thing I was thinking about is like, oh, hey, I'm paying too much taxes. I was much more worried about being able to have the resources available to be able to help these people who are dying, who shouldn't be dying. That's normal. That's how you feel, you know? But he was like, the yelling, the performative yelling, like your mom who's really bad at disciplining you is trying to discipline you because dad's out of town for the weekend. You know, that's what this comes off as.
That America has a bunch of problems, and I think every person here wants to solve the problems, and I think everybody's bringing what they have to the table with their ideas on how to get us to unify. This kind of stuff, right? But you got something in there. Hopefully, I mean, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you have something in there that's redeeming about you that would bring all of the
She's fucking grilling them.
Americans together. So I hope that we end on the note of American.
UNITY.
I would like to say we're all made in the image of God, and so we're all have our
God looks like a lot of different things.
Inherent worth just because we're made in His image, and we should treat each other as fellow image bearers, not just by the color of our skin. I mean, that's Martin Luther.
I would say that if you promote an idea of empathy, you wouldn't really be Republican. I'm just not trying to be an asshole. You would just be like, yo, where the fuck are the dealing with any issues that we have going on? To be absolutely honest with you, I'm not even saying Democrats much better, but it is. Well, it's not. They're not great, but it's better. Like at least they're. Hey, what do we do about healthcare? Conservatives, nothing. Progressives, universal healthcare. What are we doing about? Like, you know what I mean? That's where it comes down to. What do we do about wealth inequality? Progressives, let's increase the minimum wage. Conservatives, let's just fucking keep cutting taxes to the point that it gives rich people, billionaires, lots of money, and doesn't. Because here's the reality: we can't cut taxes. You're just living in a fucking delusional fantasy world if you think that we can cut taxes. We need to increase taxes probably and implement some kind of a redistribution of wealth program, like a UBI, factually. And the reason I'm saying this is because we're moving into a technology generation where there are going to be fewer jobs. Those jobs, the wages are being driven down because those jobs are easier because you have technology to displace things. In every facet, technology is getting better. It's making jobs easier, more accessible, and it's removing jobs. When it comes to truck driving, things like a GPS, and I know it sounds silly, comfortable seating, these are things that reduce the ability to have to hire more people, and you can pay people less because it's more accessible. When it comes to grocery stores, they're displacing jobs by having self-checkouts. When it comes to McDonald's and these other low-skilled labor jobs, that's what's getting displaced. You can press buttons on a fucking kiosk, and especially since we have a generation of people who don't want to talk to anybody, that's more appealing to go on a self-checkout line than it is to dealing with somebody. That's the reality of the situation. All these low-skilled labor jobs are going away. We need to figure out a way to redistribute the wealth as less and less jobs are going to be appearing. So you cannot cut taxes. We need to audit government or the way that the government actually spends our money needs to be audited 1,000%. We need to, we should have a breakdown on every fucking expenditure that exists on everything. This shouldn't be that hard to do, right? Then we can know, hey, we're spending too much here, et cetera, right? But at the end of the day, cutting taxes, it's just not going to work. You really cannot do it. We need to spend our taxes better. Sorry, I have like a headache. We need to do that, but we can't really cut taxes. And we need to invest in redistribution of wealth programs. So,
King said.
He also did not like capitalism.
I think something that's really challenging, I've definitely been guilty in the past of throwing around the Uncle Tom word. I used to be hardcore progressive. I'm still relatively progressive. But something that I've learned as time has gone on is being a white person isolates you from a lot of the different types of racial struggles that people go through. And those struggles can take a lot of different forms. Not just, you know, was my ancestor a slave, and not just is my culture bad, but sometimes in the way that, you know, people grow and develop, right? Like, am I actually choosing these political beliefs because they mean something to me, or is it because I'm black or my parents are black? If I speak a certain way, am I betraying my race? If I am a political orientation, am I a bootlicker? And I think that it's important when you're coming from a progressive point of view to understand that even though there are conservatives that are black people, you have to treat them as individuals and not just come at it with this like, you're black, you're a conservative, therefore here's like 6 or 7 different slurs that I can use against you, but they're approved because I happen to be on the progressive side.
Base. All right, cool. Cool stuff.